Hey everybody, it's Zeph here. I'm starting to do some video tutorials to help some people get into chip and figure it out. This is going to be a really pretty quick one. I'm going to just glance over all of the commands in LSDJ and the way that they work. So I'm basically just going to go A to Z through all the different commands, quickly scan over how each one works and what its basic functions are. I'm not going to get too complex or get into any of the complicated, workarounds and glitches you can do with some of them. That'll be for another video for advanced users. But we'll get started here, and this isn't going to be an LSDJ tutorial. This is just going to be a quick command overview. So if you don't know what you're doing in LSDJ, check an LSDJ tutorial first, because this is just going to cover the commands. But we'll start off with the A command, and all of this is in the manual, I should say, and it's actually fairly well written, so I highly recommend you check the manual as well. But if you're a visual learner and you just kind of want to see how they're used, this would be a quick way to get that as well. So first off, anytime you're working with commands, if you forget what one of them does, double tap A over the command and it'll bring up the little tooltip at the top, and if you wait, most of them will scroll through and tell you what each of the numbers does and that sort of thing. Okay, so we're going to start off with A, and that's run table, probably because T was taken for tempo. And so what this does is it basically lets you pick a value from 0 to 1F. That's how many tables you have. If you go over, you can see I've got a couple of these filled already. Let's pick a new one here. Let's just do table 01 and I'll clear that out. Okay. So, if you play a note, so you just got a regular note there, you can hear not much going on. If you run a table on it, and I should say as well, inside each instrument, you've got a table option here. You can pick any table you want here, and it'll always play that table on the instrument, but the A command will actually override that table. So, if you want, you can have an instrument normally playing a table and then change it from that, using the table command. We're just going to leave that off for now. And then on table 1, I'm just going to put in a really simple, let's do a major chord here, and I'll explain what the H command does later, but we'll show that if you run this on here, it'll play a chord for you. Okay, and if you want, you can have it apply the table later, or if you want to switch tables partway on, you can do that too. Let's just turn this into a minor chord here. There we go. Okay, so that's tables. And tables are actually very advanced. You can do lots of complicated stuff in them, and you'll see, you've got 2 different rows of commands, so everything you learn about commands you can apply in tables, but that's for another video. Next command, C command. This will, it'll sound a lot like the last thing I did, because basically all I did in the table was make an arpeggio. This is a really quick, easy way to do it without using up all your tables. C command, I'm assuming, stands for chord, and you can punch in your values here. So this is what a minor chord looks like. That's 3 semitones up and then 7 semitones up, and what it'll do is it'll go from the root note and then go up 3, up 7, back to the root note if you run something like this. Okay, and you can hear if you change these values, it'll affect, oh, and when I say it goes 3 up, then 7 up, that's 7 up from the root note. It's always from the root note, it doesn't stack. Okay, so you can see how that works, and of course if you run those later on, it'll keep applying it to the first note. There's a couple quirks about it. If you leave the second note blank, it'll just do a 2-note chord between the root note and the second one, or sorry, the root note and the first value there. And if you leave the first one blank and use the second, what it will actually do is it'll do the root note twice and then the second note. So yeah, we'll do that. Okay. yeah, super handy, but not too complicated. I'm sure you can figure it out. The D command is one of the more advanced ones, I suppose. You're probably not going to be using this much in any of your, your first LSDJ songs, but it does come in handy at certain points in the future. What it stands for is a delay. So it will delay the playing of the note by however many ticks you punch in here. So by default, each step is 6 ticks. So if I do this effectively, it will play this note in this position, the first step, as opposed to right here. Well, I mean, that doesn't seem too useful because if you wanted to, you could just put it there. But as soon as you start dealing with different grooves, and as soon as you start dealing with, say you want to play it a half step later, then it starts to come in handy. So if you want like a little flam on your drums, you can, delay the first snare hit so that it's right before the second one, or if you want to do like a little grace note. So you can barely hear the first one there. If you want to make it a little more pronounced. But if you take this away, yeah. It's also good for doing, let's load something up here. It's good for doing triplets and that sort of thing. So I just got a pattern loaded up here. It's got kicks, and it does a little triplet thing. Okay, so you can hear it's in between step values because it's doing a triplet, so you actually need to add up the math and figure it out that way. So the way I usually do that, well, this is getting a little advanced, but you take the total value of ticks, divide it by 3 or whatever, and then you just need to make sure your notes actually line up on those. So yeah, I'll get into that in the advanced video, but you can do triplets and that sort of thing with it. Okay, E command. This one's really handy. You're probably going to use it a lot. It stands for envelope, and you'll notice inside each note we've also got an envelope command here. So usually I'll set an envelope for the instrument, but if you want to humanize your patterns, do something a little more interesting, or if you just want one note to be different, well, there's no point in making a whole new instrument, just use an E command. So like I said, that stands for envelope, and if you double check on it, you can see what the values do. But the first value is essentially, it says attack, but it's basically where your sound starts in volume. So if you put it to F, your sound is going to start as loud as it can be, and 0, it's going to start off completely silent. The second value is, it changes as soon as you pass 8. So 8 is a steady sound. Okay, anything below that does a decay. Anything above that, it'll rise. Okay, so just quickly here, I'll show you how this works. So A8 is steady. A7 has the longest delay that you can do with an envelope command. Sorry, not A7. 7 is the longest delay, but obviously if you set the volume higher, it'll take longer for it to decay to 0. And if you put it shorter, it'll go quicker. And then as you bring the second digit down, it goes quicker. So those are handy if you're doing, arpeggios and or even, you're making a snare sound on the other channels. I should say too, all these commands, unless I specify otherwise, work the same on all 3 of the types of channels here. So the pulse, the wave, and the noise. It'll work all the way across unless I say otherwise. Yeah, and then as soon as you go up above 8, then you're going to get the rising sound. So usually, if you're doing this for a dynamic, you want to start the first digit off fairly low. I usually go, something 4 or below. And starts off at 9 it rises as the quickest, so it goes right up to full speed, right up to full volume fairly quickly. If you go over to F, it rises slower. Okay, that's basically that. If you start it off at 0, you can hear you get a nice long envelope there. Okay, so that's envelope commands on the pulse channel, and this is one of the commands that actually does change if you're on the wave channel, because on the Game Boy, let's pick an instrument here. Good. Okay. Okay, so you got your sound here, and the wave channel has a lot lower resolution for volume envelopes and that sort of thing. That's just the way that the Game Boy works in the actual hardware. So you actually only have 4 options for the volume of something in the wave channel. You got volume level 0, which is no sound. Not terribly interesting. Then you got 1 through 3 for volume levels. Okay, so not much option there. You know, if you want, you can kind of build your own envelopes. You don't have any options that'll change them for you, but you can build tables and you can build it in like this. If you kind of want to fade out, you can do some cool tricks, you know, having the volume pop in and out, but that's for a more advanced video anyways. Yeah, so that's E command, real quick. F command, I guess I'll stay in the wave channel here. Okay, so the F command is strictly a wave channel command. It won't do any good in any of the others. I believe it stands for frame because you can go in, and if you go to your synth menu here, yeah, here, where am I? There we go. Okay, so I'm on synth 6 here. You come in and you look at your wave, and this is built up using the synth command. That's something you'll probably want to read the manual for. You can see it goes through all of these different frames in the sound, and when you just play the sound, that's what it iterates through. Okay, so you can hear those sounds are all of the different frames there. Now, normally, depending on what you have your play mode set to, it'll just go through once, or you can make it loop or ping pong between them. Usually when you're using the F command, you most of the time want it on manual. There's exceptions to that. But for the sake of it, we'll put it on manual, and that means basically it won't change the frame for you. You change it yourself using F commands whenever you want to. So you can hear it's just playing the first frame. Now if we put an F command, you can make it, you know, either start on a later frame, or usually if you're having trouble lining up the frame changes with your tempo, you can do something like this or run it in a table. I don't usually do that. I just fiddle around until I get the right values, but it does work. Now, thing to know about the frame command that's a little confusing is it doesn't jump to the number that you punch in. It doesn't go to frame 8 if you put in F08. What it does is it actually adds the number that you put on to the current frame. So if you want it to, this will just, it'll start off on frame 0, then jump 1 frame up to frame 1, then frame 2, then frame 3, etc. So this will go all the way through, up till whatever, up till here. Okay, so, you know, as you go up, it'll jump larger and larger values. If you want, you can also reverse values. So FF will reverse 1 frame, it'll go back 1 frame, FE will go back 2, FD will go back 3, etc. Now, another interesting thing to note is as you skip through frames, if you actually go through more than the, I think it's 16 frames that each instrument has, it'll actually start on the next synth. So you can actually jump from one synth to another that way, which gets a little confusing. And you have to be careful because if you change one of your other instruments, it'll actually change what this one sounds like because it's using the frames from a different instrument. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, another thing, it does affect kit instruments as well, so we'll make one of those real quick here. Let's just make a new kit. Oh, sorry. Alright, let's do the 80, or no, let's go all the way over. Just for demonstration's sake, let's do the animal kit. How about that? Okay, so there's a nice cow. And what the F command does is it changes the starting point. So that's actually, you can change that in here as well, the offset it's called, and that'll change it in ticks or something like that, the length into the sample that it starts. So if you change it here, you can hear we're going to cut off a bit of the move. Oh, maybe we need a bit more. So it cut off the first part there. And you have the option to do that with frames as well if you don't want to run it for the entire instrument. So there's basic, and then if you skip a couple frames. Okay, so that'll just jump into the sample. So if you want to skip the attack on one of your samples when you loaded it in, or you know, you only want the end of a crash or something like that, you can do that. I don't use it much, but that's the way it works. Okay, next up is a G command, and this one's actually really pretty handy. Sensor groove, and if you, this is a little more advanced too. A lot of beginner users don't come down into the groove command area here. They just kind of leave it be because they don't understand it or something like that. It is really good to learn, and so I'll just run a quick overview of what it does here. Essentially, you can see we have all of the options for all of the different ticks here, but it's not using them. It's only using the first two here, and it just assumes that it'll repeat it for the rest. So on groove 0, we have 6 ticks for the first one, 6 ticks for the second, and it'll just keep going. So it'll play steady, 6 ticks for each step. And a tick is just kind of a made up amount of time based on the tempo that the Game Boy runs on. So 1 tick is the lowest resolution that you can do anything in LSDJ, and if you bump up the tempo, that tick gets faster. But so if it assumes that you want to run on groove 0 unless you specify otherwise. So if you just hit play, it'll play through at 6 ticks per second. But there are other grooves. If you hold B and press over, you'll iterate through the grooves. So you can see most of them are set to 6/6 right now, but usually I'll set groove 1 to 3/3, which is essentially half of this one. And since I'm setting the values to half as long, it will play twice as fast when you go on groove 1. Sorry if that confuses you. You just gotta fiddle around and pick it up. So let's do a quick little arpeggio here or something, and I'll show you what it sounds like. Okay. Okay, and we'll copy that. Okay, so this is playing at standard speed, and then I'll move it up to groove 1, which is half as many ticks, which is twice as fast. Okay, so you can hear it will play at double speed. Okay, and yeah, you can go in and make any combination you want. Another thing I guess I'll show you is you can actually do swing with it. This is where that's why it says tick/swing on there. I don't use that much either, but if you go in here and then click, it'll actually keep the number of ticks the same if you go up and down, and keep it spaced properly. So you'll see they still add up to 12 no matter how much you change it. It'll just change the amount of swing. So if I play it now on groove 2, so you can hear it's got a bit of a swing vibe to it. So that's handy. Use that whenever you want. The one thing to keep in mind is when you change a groove, you have to change it back or it won't revert. So you may want this one going twice as fast, you may not want your next one in the line. So just make sure you change it back with the G00 command. Also, if you're running it twice as fast, it will actually go through the phrases twice as quick. So if you're using that in a song, keep that in mind. You'll want to double the amount of phrases per chain as well. That's G commands. There's a lot more you can do with those, and they work in tables as well. So tables, instead of by default running at G00, they actually run at 1 tick per line, and then if you use the G commands, you'll change it to however many ticks you want. Okay, the H command. This one's handy all over the place. I guess starting off in the normal phrase screen here, the way it works is it'll skip to the next phrase whenever you put it in, and if you want, you can get it to actually skip to a specific step in the next phrase. There's limited uses for that function, but I suppose if I'm skipping from here and I want to make it jump to, say, the 4th step on the next one, you can do that. It's also handy if you're, say, writing something in 3/4, and you don't want to you want to keep it lined up, I suppose. LSDJ is really really made for writing things in 4/4 or any multiple of that. But if you want to write it in 3/4, when it gets down to the H, it'll just skip over to the next phrase. Okay, and that works better when you're playing in song mode here. Let's do that. So you can see it jumps when it reaches the H rather than going all the way to the end. That's enter hop. And I'll show you how that works in tables as well, because it's actually quite handy. Let's run a table here. Okay, so here I used the H command earlier. If I take that off, it'll play through this transposition here, 047, but then it'll just keep going, and then it'll loop around when it hits the bottom. Okay, let's set this envelope higher too. 1 second. Okay, so now it'll just keep going past it. So that doesn't sound like a very good arpeggio, and if you wanted to, I suppose you could copy these and just keep pasting, but it doesn't always line up properly. Like there, we're going to have a double 0, and it's kind of a pain. So you might as well just do it this way. If you put in the H, it will just hop back up to the top. So you can see it's only playing down to here, and then it goes back up. And it's a lot more consistent. And there's a couple other options in here as well. You can see the first digit, as it says, is the number of times that it will loop. So if you want it to play that ARP 4 times and then carry on, and you got some other commands down here, it'll do that for you. So you can hear it's playing 4 times and then it goes on. And then the second value is where it hops to. So if you wanted to, you could have, a couple different ARPs, and then if you want, you could have it hop, instead of back up to 0, you can have it hop over to 4, and then it'll come down to here, hop back up to 4, and you can see it just keeps going from 4 till the hop, because it keeps going back up. And you can actually do nested loops with this sort of thing, but that gets a little more complicated, so I'll go over that in another video, but very useful. Okay, oh, and one last thing, on the phrase screen, if you actually do HFF, it'll stop playing the entire sequencer. So be careful about using that. Only use that at the end of your song, because it'll stop all 4 channels from playing whenever it hits. Yeah, and that's just HFF is special. So keep an eye out for that. If your sequencer is stopping for no reason, you might have one of those sitting around. K command is next. This one's really handy too. Useful for all sorts of things, and you can mix it in with a bunch of different commands, but basically it stops whatever is playing in that channel. Yeah, pretty basic. And so if you have a note that's playing and it doesn't have an envelope that fades out and you want it to stop, throw one of those in there. The numerical values here is actually, it will delay the cut by however many ticks you put in. Now this is usually handy when you're playing it on the same, you put the command on the same line as your note, because if you leave it blank, you can hear I'm trying to play it, but it won't play because it's cutting it before you even hear it. But if you delay it, you can have the note play for 1 tick, or 3, or something like that. So if you're putting a bunch of them in a row, you can get some cool effects there. So that's the way that works. And be careful, it doesn't always work so well if you go past the 6 ticks, because if another command triggers, I think it forgets about this one, so it might not always work. Just be careful about that. But it's great up till there. Okay, the L command, sorry, the L command, legato, and that's for doing bends. So that'll work not so well in noise channel, I wouldn't recommend it, but everything else it works fine. And so you can bend. Now the values here, I'll show you a basic bend first, I guess. We'll bend an octave up from G5 to G6. And if you leave it at 0, it won't bend at all. Okay, so you can hear it's doing a pitch bend from G5 to G6 with a speed of 1. One thing I'll qualify is the legato speed, just like the vibrato speed and the pitch bend speed, are all regulated in the instrument options by this vibrato type here. And so whatever you set this to, if it's high frequency, it'll go quick, and then usually if you're not on high frequency, I'm usually on the sine wave here, and that'll go slower. So you can hear it doesn't even make it in time. That just depends on what range you want your bend to be in for that instrument. Usually leave it at high frequency, but so you can hear it bends quick. Okay, as you bump this up, it'll go quicker to the point where, I mean, if you go up to 1 on high frequency, 10, sorry, on high frequency, basically it's there, but it's very difficult to hear. And it just kind of makes it smooth, bending in between. Yeah, so that's how that works. Pretty simple. As you bump up the numbers, faster it bends. And make sure you check your vibrato type as well. Okay, and that works for, yeah, like I said, wave channel as well. Next up, M command. Now, this it stands for master, and it's basically like a volume setting for the entire Game Boy's output. So instead of affecting a single channel, it actually affects the master fader. So this one's actually a little confusing to just figure out. It doesn't necessarily make sense. So what it does is, if from, I guess I should state, the first digit there affects the left stereo channel, and the one on the right affects the right stereo channel. So you can actually change the volume of each stereo channel independently. You're going to get some weird balancing issues if you do that, unless you're going for a specific effect. But I mean, it's handy sometimes. I've used it. And 7 is full value, so that's maxed out. And then as you go down from there, it'll take the master volume down. Okay, so this will be a pretty choppy and sloppy fade out here. And yeah, master volume 0 isn't silence, just so you know. It's just as low as it can go. And yeah, if you mess with that, you can get different stereo settings. Now, as you go past M77, I believe I'll just check here, it starts to add on or subtract. Yeah, so 0 to 7 is absolute value, 9 to B is increase, and the F to C is decrease. So if you want, you know, you don't necessarily know what your volume level is at when you reach a certain point, but you know you want it to decrease in both channels by 1, then MFF will decrease both channels. And then, you know, these ones, 9 to B, will increase them. That gets a little more complicated. I don't use it much. But one thing to note as well is master does reset every time that you stop playback. It'll go back to full volume, so keep that in mind. Next up, O command. This is actually really handy for doing some special effects. I won't get into those until the next video, so if you want to learn some really cool ways to affect your sound, the O commands are actually a way to do it, because you can play with stereo glitching, and it's not the way it's meant to be used, but it works great. So as you can see, we've got a grayed out L and R here. That stands for left and right, and this will pan the note left or right, or return panning to center. And if you just leave it like that, it essentially mutes it because it's not sending it to the left or right channel. Okay, and then left. Not sure if YouTube will let this come through, but you can hear it's panning from left to right. And if you go into the instrument settings, you also have the output here. You can change it from left to right. So you can change it there, but the O command will override it, and you can run that in tables and that sort of thing too. But yeah, switches panning left to right. That's all you need to know. P command. This one's really handy. Use it all the time. You can use this for all sorts of glitches and stuff too. It's pitch bend, and so yeah, basically it will pitch bend up if you do values over 0, pitch bend down if you do values under, and the further you go from 0, the faster it bends. And it'll wrap. Once it reaches the highest note possible, it'll come back around to the bottom and go again. Okay, and like I said, if you go under it, it'll bend down. Okay. And you can use that in kick drums and all sorts of nifty things. Like I said, this is just covering the basic functions. And that'll work for wave channel. Not really sure what you get if you run that on a noise channel because there's no pitch, but you can try it if you want. R command. So this is a Retrigger, and so this one basically it'll play the note back really fast. So it'll loop it really quick. So I'll actually show you this on the wave channel. It's a little easier to demonstrate. And if you want, you can run volume changes on it as well. Okay, let's get a drum kit here. Okay, so there's a closed hi-hat you can hear, and if I run a retrigger on that, there we go. I think it's second column. Let's see. Okay, so the second column is the amount of ticks in between it replays, in between each time it replays. So right now it's essentially playing it, replaying the sound every 3 ticks, which is double speed to if I were to put it on every line. And you can make that even smaller too, so this will replay every tick. So you can hear it kind of goes crazy. And then the first column here changes the volume. So, and let's see, so 0, yeah, is off. 1 to 7, it'll increase with each play, and then anything above the 7 or 8 here, it'll decrease. Now, I don't usually use that on the wave channel because it doesn't work great because, like I said, the wave channel only has 3 volumes. You can try it out on the pulse channel if you like. But this is a handy way to do, you know, flams and really quick hits. And if you put it to R6, it's just going to play as if you punch it in every time. Okay, that's the Retrigger command. Other cool things you can do with that as well. But that's basically it there. S command is next. So we'll start off in pulse 1 here. Now this command is unique in that the Game Boy will only execute it if it's on the pulse 1 channel. So even though the pulse 1 and pulse 2 channels are basically exactly the same in every other aspect in LSDJ, this is one where they're different. If you go into pulse 1 channel here, and you run an S command, it stands for sweep in the pulse channel and shape in the noise channel. So as you run it here, and this is a really confusing one to use and you get a bunch of weird sounds. It's essentially a pitch bend command, but instead of using the Game Boy's logic chip to calculate a pitch bend, it simulates it using the Game Boy's hardware in a very unique way, so you get some strange glitches out of it. Let's change our envelope here. Okay, and I'm just going to fiddle around with this so you can hear a couple different ways it sounds. So lots of weird, glitchy pitch bends and stuff. It's tough to use properly, but cool for some glitches and stuff. if you want, and I hear a lot of people use it for kick drums and that sort of thing as well. Let's go into the noise channel here, and I believe this one doesn't do anything in the wave channel, so don't bother messing around with it in there. Okay, and in the noise channel, the S command actually stands for shape, and it will shape the noise of whatever's playing. So you can hear some basic white noise there, and as you run S commands on it, it will begin to warp it. Okay, and this one's, it's a little tough to know exactly how it's affecting it, but just know that it's based on, I guess I could make a noise instrument here, okay. It's based on this shape value here in the instrument, and it'll, I believe, add on to this. Whatever values you put in here will be added to the current shape value. Not positive on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. And you'll notice also you've got an S command thing in here. This is just because Johan changed the way that the new versions of LSDJ affect noise, and so if you wrote one with an older version of LSDJ, then you're going to want it on the old version, which is stable, but usually I just leave it on free because if you're writing anything new, it just makes sense. Yeah, so you can come in here and mess with those, and it'll change the shape of your noise, and you can run those in tables as well. Okay, next one's the tempo command. That's for T. Okay, I'll just run an ARP here. Okay, so as you play, it will change the tempo to whatever the value is here. You'll notice you only have the 2 digits, right? So you'd think, okay, well I can only go up to, you know, 99 or something like that, 99 beats per minute. But they maintain their hexadecimal value rather than their actual numeric value. So you have the full range here. Anything under 80, though, will just default to 80 because LSDJ can't actually play a tempo lower than 80. So I'm going to start bumping this up, and you'll see the tempo value on the side by this this note here will start to jump up. So I was jumping up by 16s there, just by doing the first digit. You know, you can do the math and calculate all your hexadecimal, but basically get close and then just fiddle around until the number says what you want if you're using tempo commands. Another cool thing, I usually point this out just because not too many people know about it. If you actually tap A on the tempo here, it'll run a tap tempo function. So if you're playing in a band or something, or you want to jam along with some music on the radio, or you just know what tempo you want, you tap A on here in a steady rhythm, and it'll calculate what the tempo of the taps are. Really handy feature. Okay, next up is a V command. This one's a staple for doing leads and glitches and all sorts of stuff. V command for vibrato. So first digit is the depth of the vibrato, how high or low it'll dip. Second digit is the speed that it does that. I think, oh actually, I think it might be backwards on that. Yeah, so second digit is the depth of the vibrato, first digit is the speed, sorry about that. So if we, and I believe it's in semitones, so if we do this to 2, it'll dip between the root note, it'll go up 2 semitones, and then go down 2 semitones from the root note, and then back to center. And then as you bump up the speed, you get to a point where it's going so fast that you can barely hear it. Now, and of course if you bump this up, it'll dip between, C is an octave above and an octave below. Gets a bit extreme. Cool thing I'll show you real quick, and I'll go over this in the advanced video as well, is you can actually get some cool distortion effects if you set your tempo to specific, or sorry, your vibrato to pretty fast values. And so it gets to a point where you can't even hear that it's bending, it just gives you this kind of distorted effect. That's pretty handy. Also, keep in mind, like I said before, this is affected by the vibrato type here. And also, if you push up or down on here, it'll change whether it bends up or down first, if that's something that you're picky about. And then here you can set it to do ramp style bends, sine bends, or square bends. This one gets a little weird. And anything other than the HF here, the high frequency, will run a lot slower. So you can get a lot more control over your bends that way, but you got to bump up your speed amount a fair amount. So that's how you get really slow bends. Okay, next up, and that'll work on wave command as well, probably not noise. Now, the W command stands for wave, I believe, or width, sorry. The width of the pulse here. So this one only works on the pulse channel. So you can see, and it actually gives you a visual representation of each of the pulse widths. So I think it's 12.5%, 25%, 50%, and I think it's 75%. And that just directly affects the sound. You've got that option in here as well. It's the wave width there. Okay, and you've got a different tone for each of those. The 25% and the 75 are going to sound exactly the same. That's just the way it is. And so you can iterate between those in tables and stuff and get some cool effects if you want to run a command, or if you want to keep it simple, just change it in your instrument here. Okay, last and probably least is the Z command. I don't think I've ever even used this one in a song. It's a randomizer, essentially. So, as you can see on the top, it will redo the last command, but with change in values according to the amounts that you set. So, let's demo this with V command, I guess. So we'll run a standard V command, and I'm not even going to put anything on it. It'll just play basic. And then I'm going to run Z commands, which will take that V command, and it'll add a random number between the last value and whatever you punch in. So it's going to punch in a random number between 00 and the 66 that I put in here. And that's going to get some weird effects on a vibrato too, because each digit means different things. But you can get some cool stuff going on there, so I'm actually just going to put in a couple of them so you can hear that it's randomizing. So you can hear it's going through a bunch of different random values and messing with it that way. That's and that'll work on any command, I believe. So yeah, that's LSDJ Commands A to Z by Zeph here. If you have any more questions about LSDJ, come find me somewhere, or just wait for me to do more videos. I'm gonna try and put out a couple more videos in the future. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to go through all of these commands again in greater detail, going into some of the more complicated techniques that I've done. But also know that almost all of my save commands, or sorry, save files for all of my songs are out there somewhere on the internet. If you download them from my Bandcamp, I think I have them all included in there. Actually, I know I do. So yeah, you can grab them there, and the save files for my new album with Danimal are going to be in there as well. So you can check that out and learn something that way too. Yeah, keep on chipping. Peace.